Hello, everybody. I am so happy to host today's panel with such visionary, powerful, and passionate women who are dedicated to sustainability and justice. My name is Maya Wickler, and I am a writer and academic, and most of my work has been for Teen Vogue and Vice, covering the climate justice activism that's been happening around the world. And today we are going to be talking to these incredible panelists and women and learning about the artisanal and innovation that prioritizes zero waste to environmental safety in the diamond industry. And we're going to dive into all things sustainability and also learn about incredible leadership and female empowerment. Before we begin, let's have the panelists introduce themselves. So first we'll hear from Melissa Joy.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks, National Diamond Council for hosting this amazing panel. My name is Melissa. I have a jewelry brand, Melissa Joy Manning. I started it about 25 years ago by walking around to stores I liked and asking people to carry my jewelry, and then kind of scaled it over the last 25 years. Moved to New York 15 years ago and co-founded the Council of Fashion Designers of America Sustainability Committee when that was not anything or concept that anyone discussed in the industry. I'm really proud that we have moved the conversation forward and that sustainability has become a key point within jewelry and fashion. So I'm really excited to discuss that with you all today. So thank you again for having me.
Thanks, Melissa. Grace, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Maya, and thank you to the National Diamond Council for organizing this amazing event. My name is Grace Zvinowanda. I'm the current senior HSC advisor for RZM ROA in Rishawane, Zimbabwe. I have 15 years of experience working as an environmental expert in the mining industry for both underground and open cast mining. So I'm an environmental pollution scientist, and over the 15 years, I've done a lot of research and environmental projects where I've been implementing sustainability concept and environmental protection measures to ensure that mining is done sustainably without harming the environment. So I'm so excited to be one of the panelists. And now I learned I got to learn about sustainability issues when I was advised by my uncle to look into this environmental program when I wanted to start geology at university. So that's how I changed from my interest from geology to environment, and now environment and sustainability issues are my passion. So that's how I learned about this, and I'm excited that the journey continues and it's really exciting. Thank you. And thanks to the attendees for making their time to attend to this webinar.
Thank you, Grace. Kirsten, could you share a bit about yourself?
Sure, and thanks, and very happy to be here and in such great company, obviously. Yes, so Kirsten Hund, I started in October, so pretty recently, especially since I haven't been away from my home since, with De Beers as their head of carbon neutrality. It's a new position, and it's for De Beers is committed to be carbon neutral by 2030, and it's my job to get us there. I joined from the World Bank in Washington, D.C., where I worked for the Energy and Extractives Global Practice, and I did a lot of work there on climate smart mining, which really looked at the minerals that we need for the clean energy transition. A lot of those minerals come from developing countries, so we really tried to work with governments and organizations in these countries to make sure that all the minerals that we need for a clean energy transition are also mined in a way that actually benefits the population in the most sustainable way possible. Before that, I was with World Wildlife Fund based in Central Africa, working on trying to address the impacts of mineral extraction in the rainforest. So I am a political scientist by training, but I have been working on sustainability in the mining sector for a very long time. So very, very keen to share some of the ideas here. Thanks.
Thanks, Kirsten. And lastly, Fairleaf.
Hi, thanks. And thank you, Myron. Lovely to hear from all of you about your stories. I can't wait to hear more. It's great. I'm Fairleaf, the founder and director of Be Bond, a lifestyle brand inspired by raising babies and living slower in Botswana. It's quite a new brand. I founded it in 2016, and we focus on interiors, children's wear, and jewelry, which is obviously why I'm joining you today. It's a very personal brand to me. I named it after my grandmother, who was born in Africa, where my mum grew up, and now where my children have grown up. So it's all kind of wrapped up in this sort of weird family circle of a connection to Africa. And the mission is really to create unique products that tell a story, which are made sustainably with respect of the environment, and really to change attitudes of consumerism. So that's also a big part of what we're trying to do, and make a positive impact to people and wildlife. So I'll get on to all of that, and I'm happy to share the story with you all and for the listeners. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also just want to take a second to remind folks who are watching that there will be time for audience questions at the end of the panel. And so if you have any questions that come up throughout this discussion, feel free to throw it into the chat and we will get to it at the end. Our panelists have made a mark for themselves in their respective fields, a feat in of itself, considering the sheer lack of female representation in leadership roles around the world. Some of the greatest successes and impacts begin with a simple story, a catalyst moment of reflection, or the tenacity and perseverance of a change maker with a vision. I would love to hear from you all about the breakthrough stories and significance of not only being incredible leaders in a male-dominated industry, but also your work empowering women as well. So Grace, I would love to hear from you first. If you could tell us a little bit about your career to date at RZM Maroa as an environmental expert, and also, is it unusual to see women in this position in the diamond production world?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you for the great question. After attaining my first degree, that is a Bachelor of Science honors in environmental pollution science, I joined a African Associated Mines, which is a mine about 60 kilometers from where I am right now. And before joining Maroa Diamonds, RZM Maroa in 2008 as an environmental officer. So I was on this for 2 years, and my main role was to maintain an environmental management system according to ISO 14001 standards. And the role entailed training and awareness, environmental monitoring, which involved monitoring of air, water, land use, and biodiversity, as well as implementing the mine environmental management plan according to the environmental impact assessment regulations. And the other key role there was environmental reporting, which included greenhouse gas emissions accounting. Then as a result of my efforts, I was recognized and promoted to the role of environmental advisor with added responsibilities of ensuring compliance to all the health, safety, and environmental, legal and other requirements, as well as tailings dam rehabilitation planning, and a more detail on sustainability reporting for the business unit. And In 2015, I was again promoted to become the Senior Health Safety and Environmental Advisor to lead the Health Safety and Environmental team and coordinate the development and implementation of the integrated health safety and environmental management system according to 45,001 in the quality standard ISO 9001. And this also entails enforcement and upholding of health, safety, and environmental standards. On the second part of the question, I would say that I know many women in the environmental field, but not in the diamond production industry. So I think it is rare and unique, just like the diamonds, to find a woman on this position. And also due to the fact that diamond mines are few and located in remote areas, which females might not be willing to stay away from the females, from their families, In addition, in the mining industry is perceived as a male-dominated industry, and very few ladies are willing to take up the roles in this industry. So I would say that it is unusual to find women in this role that I'm currently holding. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. That's so inspiring to hear about the trajectory of your career, and especially just knowing how rare it is for women to have such a large part in this industry. Fairless, I would love to hear from you. Bayabon does a lot of work to empower communities, and can you tell us a little bit more about these projects? And are many of the artisans and craftspeople that you work with female, and what do the women particularly bring to your creative process?
So living in Botswana really changed a lot of things for me. It coincided with moving to Botswana as a new mum. So I had little children running around me, and a lot of what I have created, or a lot of what is part of the mission about creating unique products that tell a story, is really connected to my exploration of living in Botswana. And every artisan that we work with, every craftsman that we have involved and co-created with, are people that I know and that I've met. So yeah, I'm happy to share with you. So one of the things that that I mentioned earlier is we work with children's wear, and we have co-created with a very local, family-run, second-generation owned factory. I say factory, it's actually more of a workshop, so don't get grandiose ideas. We're supporting a local workshop, a local business, and they already were making children's clothing, so it's a really good fit for us. But they were struggling. They were struggling with getting enough work, enough business, making school uniforms due to cheap imports coming into the country. And they were in a position where they were having to let staff go. So when I met the owner, Poppy, and heard her story, I asked her if she would be open to collaborate with Beerbond, still working in the children's sector. And yeah, she was absolutely delighted. It meant that she could secure one more job, which is incredible because all the women we work with, they're the breadwinners, and really supporting one artisan has a much bigger impact. So that's the children's wear. And in terms of what we produce, going back to changing attitudes of consumerism, which is part of our mission statement, we're very much working in the slow fashion movement, where we produce small batch production. The styles are very timeless. So we look at seasonless, timeless, very simple shapes, which for children is great, allows their personality to shine through. And things that don't go out of fashion, then even for small little children's clothing, they're things that you want to hang on to and either pass on in your family, or perhaps keep and save for the next generation. So that's one of the collaborations that we've created. And then another one is working with a very established in Botswana weaving community. They're also just outside of the capital, Gaborone. They're in a town called, or village called Udi. And this is a group of 20 women who have got amazing skill, amazing craftsmanship. So you asked about how it is with a creative process, and it's very much we're learning from them. Obviously, we come with our ideas of what we want to create, but we're very much learning from them and working with them to pick the colors, to understand how they create. And you know, for me, it's an incredible learning. And what I'm trying to do with B-Bond is share those stories and share the process, because I think that allows people to connect with the idea of something just doesn't arrive ready-made. You know, there's a whole story behind it. So craftsmanship is really important. The rugs that we create with them are all unique. They're one of a kind, and they take anywhere between 1 and 3 months to make, depending on the complexity of the design. And they're also inspired by nature and the colors of Botswana. So that's our interiors in the rug section. And then another area that we're developing is again involving weaving, which is a traditional skill, especially in the north of Botswana. And we've collaborated with a group called the Nyamiland Weavers Trust. And again, that's a group of women. I think they actually have about 45 to 50 women who are part of this trust. And again, their mothers, their grandmothers, but alongside their day job of being agriculturalists, they're also weavers. And again, working and co-creating with them, we're identifying how can we create new products which don't exist? How can we utilize their knowledge of harvesting, their knowledge of dyeing using traditional, well, actually using tree roots and plants to dye the Makola palms. So again, depending on the size and the complexity, you know, these beautiful baskets can take anywhere between 1 and 5 months to make. And again, it's about connecting people with the story. In terms of the creative process, like I've said, it's about saying, this is our idea, what can we do, how can we work together? And it takes a long time. We've been living in Botswana for 5 years, so it's taken a lot of time to evolve these relationships and also to build trust. But one of the new things that we did, which actually launched last year whilst we were all in the middle of lockdown, was a new project which was called the B-Bond Art Competition, which is an art competition which we collaborated with a local resident artist called Anne Gollifer, who's also an international artist. And we created a new platform to enable artists from all over the nation to the opportunity to collaborate with us. And we also organized an exhibition and a copyright workshop, so adding in that element of education as well. Although it was quite difficult to manage from long distance, we had a fantastic response. So those are just some of the things that we're working on. Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing all that. And I love hearing about the weavers. That's incredible. Kirsten, I would love to hear from you about the experience that you've had in your role, because a decade ago, there really would not have been a job specifically created on carbon neutrality. Why do you think carbon neutrality needs dedicated, accountable leaders and businesses today? And can other businesses look to the diamond world for inspiration in this area?
Well, I mean, climate change is the challenge of our time, right? I think it should have been that a long time ago already, but I think it's fairly recent that it has become so high on everybody's radar. And if we want to do anything, we need to make the big changes now, right? And that's where leadership is needed. From the diamond side, I think we see, and from any consumer-facing product, right, we see a clear demand. I mean, we know we need to do it. We see the countries where we operate are already disproportionately affected by climate change. Countries in Southern Africa are seeing droughts and floods, etc. But we also see clearly from from a consumer perspective, that people are asking for it, right? They want to know, like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we asked, and still there's questions about conflict and child labor, etc. But these days, people want to know what the carbon footprint of their product is. So there's that. We need to do it because it's the right thing, but we also need to do it because our consumers ask it from us. And well, I can only speak for the bears, not for the whole mining sector, but I think that sort of differentiates us a bit from the bigger mining industry, the fact that we are, as a diamond company, consumer facing, right? I mean, nobody who's rewiring the electricity of its house is going to look at the copper and say, well, I'd really like to know if this copper has been sustainably produced. I mean, they should, but that's not the first question. Well, if you are going to buy a diamond, which is a symbol of love and all those beautiful things, then you want to know it has been produced sustainably, and the carbon footprint of that diamond is a crucial component of that. I think for us, it's also, I mean, yes, climate and the carbon footprint is crucial, but we also see that very much as an integrated piece of a much broader sustainability strategy. We have our Building Forever strategy, which really is about leaving a lasting legacy after the last diamond has come out of the ground. And it looks at all different aspects. And because climate and carbon footprint, it's not just we build a machine and we fix it, right? It's linked to health, it's linked to biodiversity, it's linked to economic development, it's linked to new skills that people need to learn, and new industries that need to be developed, etc. So how do we really take an integrated approach? And I think that is really crucial.
Kirsten, do you think that women in particular make strong leaders in this field?
I'm always a bit wary about, because the idea that women are particularly good at something also implies that they're maybe particularly bad at something else, which is pretty stigmatizing, right? So I do think you need equal opportunities, right? And we need the fact that half of humanity was excluded from these kind of positions before is bizarre. So I think it is, there's a lot of amazing climate scientists, female climate scientists out there already. I think in the technical engineering field, when I look around me, that's where we need more women. That's where I often am the only woman in a room full of men when you talk about the nuts and bolts and the machines. So that's where more work needs to be done. So it's more about getting more women involved, not necessarily about women needing to replace men because they would be better at it, from my perspective.
Thank you. Melissa, you have pointed out that one cannot speak about protecting the environment without also looking at the social elements of sustainability. And without that, we absolutely cannot act for the environment. Could you tell us more about this? And also if you see women's rights as part of the social elements of sustainability and the environment?
Sure. For me, starting out as a jewelry designer in kind of post-NAFTA, so there was not a lot of jobs in the United States for artisans earning living working wage. When I started my company, I really wanted to focus on creating community first here in the United States, so offering jobs to people who practice jewelry and craft. Was told no by every consultant I sat down. You can't be competitive with larger companies if you're going to be focused on rights with business. I mean, this was 25 years ago. And luckily I have the personality type, when someone tells me no, I figure out a workaround, and decided that no, if I was going to live authentically to my craft, I was also going to give back and create community. And we were able to do that. And that was really amazing to think that, we can do these things. We can have responsible businesses. And in that, I started then my journey about the environmental piece, learning about the impacts of mining gold, stones, and really felt compelled to make better choices. This was as early as 1997. And so I think for me, when I moved to New York and started working with the Council of Fashion Designers of America, the Danish Fashion Council, all these different places about how we could make better choices as designers with raw materials, I really started to feel like, wait a second, this original tenet of my brand, or this original tenet of belief in our community, was getting left behind because we had avoided the issue for so long, and because climate change is such an issue of our time, but that the people piece was really getting lost. And if we're only talking about, if our jewelry is sourced from clean metal and clean stones, what about who makes it? What about where it's made? What about how much they're getting paid? And if we look at sustainability in general, diamonds in general, it's a luxury issue. These are choices that we can make as consumers because we have disposable income and because we have jobs that allow us to make those choices. And for me, I just really started thinking about, if we can't have equitable wages and pull people out of a survival mode, they can't, as consumers, or a huge portion of people in the world can't make better choices in order to create a supply-demand economy that prevents better choices for me as a designer. So for me, the whole issue is intrinsically linked. It's about providing living working wage, and as consumers understanding and knowing that the people piece is just as important as the environmental piece, and that we can't change the environment without bringing people along for the ride. Because how are people, if people still can't get access to clean water, education for their children, how are we going to get them to be able to afford a natural diamond that's sourced? So I think it's a really important piece of sustainability and activism, is bringing everyone along for the ride. Do I think that it's a feminist issue? I mean, I do, but I also think it's a humanist issue, right? So, I mean, women, like men, we procreate, we have children. I think women inherently want to secure a better future for their children. And you can talk to women as they become mothers. All of these issues that were conceptual before all of a sudden become concrete. Like, what's the future hold for my children? And I think that, yes, I totally agree that we need more women in every field. But I think we also need women as leaders, because we want to see a future for everyone, and for our children, for everyone's children.
Thank you for that. From ethical sourcing, carbon neutrality, and environmental regeneration, all of these panelists are taking the lead on sustainable and bold practices for the environment. I'm really excited to hear from you all about these initiatives. And first, I would love to hear from Kirsten. As the head of carbon neutrality at De Beers Group, you're developing and leading a strategy to achieve carbon neutrality across all of De Beers operations by 2030. Can you tell us about the steps that are taking place in order to achieve this goal?
Yes, sure. It's an ambitious goal. 2030 is soon. We keep saying 10 years, but it's actually 8.5 by now. So we have developed a strategy that we are implementing while figuring out a lot of the details in due course. And our strategy is focused around reduce, replace, recover. Where reduce is really about efficiency, like what innovations can we introduce to reduce energy intensity at and energy, both electricity and fuel intensity within all our operations. Then the biggest chunk is really the replace part. It's like, how do we replace the fossil-based energy, which is basically all our electricity in Southern Africa, because it comes mostly from coal-fired power plants, and the fossil-based fuel, so the fuel we're using in our engines, etc. How do we replace that with renewable alternatives? So we are doing a lot of work at the moment on developing renewable energy, mostly solar and wind, at our Southern African sites to power our mines, and also look at alternative fuels. We are working closely with our mother company, Anglo American, at hydrogen trucks. So green hydrogen, so hydrogen produced with renewable energy. We're building a plant at one of the platinum mines to deliver the first hydrogen mine truck. So that is I'd say 70% of our emissions are coming from that piece. So that is really the large chunk of work. And then the last piece is recover. Is those hard to abate emissions that we really cannot get rid of. We're going to have to offset. But we're planning to do that ideally not by buying offsets somewhere off the market. I mean, it's great to conserve forests in Costa Rica, but there's so much work to be done in the countries where we operate. And I think the big advantages as a mining company is that we control so much land, and that land does contain carbon or has the capacity to absorb carbon. So what can we do in the land that we operate? Through regenerative agricultural projects, which have all the social co-benefits that we very much need and communities need as well. Through reforestation, we're looking at blue carbon at some of our ocean-facing sites in Namibia. So what can we do really to develop these innovative nature-based solutions that will have benefits for communities, for biodiversity, and then also give us the carbon credits that we will need for that last piece to get to carbon neutrality. But the real important piece of work is that we need to change the way we operate, right? And I think that's for all of us. We won't get to carbon neutrality and we won't get to our Paris goals if we don't do that. So that is really at the core of what we're aiming to do.
Very powerfully said. Thank you, Kirsten. The philosophy of your brand is fewer, better things. Can you talk about why this is the essence of your brand and how you design and make jewelry following this principle? And how does it influence the partners that you choose to work with?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, fewer, better things really links again back to our mission, which is about changing attitudes of consumerism. And I think that's a big one, but it's one that I wasn't going to shy away from. For me, again, I mean, I wasn't always, an environmentalist. I wasn't always the perfect person that put their recycling in the bin or, made all the right decisions. But for me, everything started when I moved out of London and moved to Botswana. And it was that switch from living this really fast-paced life to living slower, which really, again, it coincided with me being a new mom. That's probably a coincidence that the two things went hand in hand. But as Melissa mentioned, as soon as you have children, you start to think of future generations. You get this sense of responsibility that you don't have before. So yeah, moving to Botswana, living slower, really opened my eyes into seeing how interconnected we are to the planet, to everything. So yeah, I moved to Botswana. I began to see everything and took notice of everything. And in fact, I think when we arrived, we had rain for the first time in 6 months. So I left Europe, which is crazy, rains all the time, arrived, didn't rain for 6 months. And actually we were part of a 5-year drought. So, where we were, well, actually all of Botswana, it's reliant on rainfall for people. Literally the dams are there for people to drink. The rainfall is also for the wildlife, for the agriculture, for the cattle. So I think that was the aha moment for me, that I had to do something. That's even before I founded BeBond. So this was kind of the realization that I couldn't continue. If I was going to create something, I couldn't continue without it having this aspect built into it. So fewer, better things. What does that mean for our jewelry? It means designing things that are intended to be modern heirlooms. So they're modern classics. They're going to be beautiful now and in 50 years, and maybe you will hand it down. So they're also beautifully made, handcrafted. And we don't make a lot. We're actually a very new brand. So we have a few pieces that we've brought out and things that we believe in. And then if they're popular, if there's interest, then we'll develop them further. And that's also about limiting our impact, our footprint. So a lot of the things we do, we make to order. And obviously when that comes to looking at the materials we use, that's obviously really important, again, with these values that I've mentioned. And it is challenging. It's really challenging being, a small business and wanting to get, ethically mined diamonds. It's a big challenge, but we have managed to source, through our contacts, we've managed to source Botswana diamonds. So we source direct from ODC, which is the Okavango Diamond Company. And why Botswana diamonds? Well, they're the largest producer of ethically mined diamonds in the world. And they've had such a positive impact I know that Kirsten's got a big job on her hand to get everything carbon neutral, but they, you know, over the last 55 years since independence, with the amazing work of De Beers and the Botswana government, a lot of the funds raised from diamonds has gone into the infrastructure of the country. So things like roads, hospitals, schools, you know, education. And, you know, even when I was living there, they were upgrading the airports, they were building a new financial district, you know, looking forward at what's going to happen next. And I think they've just completed this mammoth bridge which connects Zimbabwe, Grace, to Botswana. So that's in the north of the country. So, you know, there are massive projects that are still going to the betterment of Botswana. So just to sort of sum up where we are today, we obviously would like to have all our stones polished in Botswana. That would be, you know, a really beautiful part of the story. At the moment, only the larger stones can be polished in Botswana, but the rest, the smaller stones have to be polished elsewhere, and we get those polished in India. But I think that journey of a Botswana diamond and what it represents is really important, because again, it's about making a positive impact and knowing what the story is of that stone, of what you're going to have in your piece of jewelry. And that's why we created Botswana Mark, which is a provenance program. So we founded that last year. It's a trademark, and it provides transparency for consumers again, which I think everyone wants transparency. Everyone's asking for, where does this come from? And so that's what we established last year. And we have another project, which is probably going to talk to you in 2 seconds about it, is about our carbon neutral scheme as well. So I'll talk to you in the next question.
I would love to hear about that if you want to share right now.
Okay, all right, I won't wait then. So our carbon neutral scheme, again, I mean, we're a tiny business, which is the beginning of the journey, but again, just trying to do everything right from the beginning. And, you know, we've had so many great examples of how to do things right. So what I felt was important was really understanding what our footprint was, and creating or adopting a scheme that works for us. So we actually have implemented something called the Zama Zama stove, which is made in Southern Africa, and we distribute that to our community in the Okavango Delta, who we work with on our wildlife conservation. So the stoves are an alternative to creating big fires and cutting down trees to cook, or to cook basically. So we distribute those in like really remote areas. Actually, they're in the offsite camps with our team over at EcoExist, and it just prevents deforestation. And for us, it's great because it gives us, you know, the credits to enable our carbon neutral. But I think that there's another side, which is the use of them and the practicalities of them. So yeah, that's part of our carbon neutral scheme as well.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us. I love the points that you made too about transparency, and it's amazing how that helps consumers, but also businesses themselves too. Melissa, you have always been a champion of ethical sourcing and production in jewelry, making social and environmental sustainability two of your top priorities. What factors do you take into account when you buy your stones and design your pieces? And what initiatives have you supported to protect the environment in your business?
Sure. So for us, you know, we're zero waste. My studio is based in the United States in Berkeley, California. We're certified green by the state of California, so our production processes are clean. And we look to use resources that fit within that scope. So for a long time, we were just using recycled 14 karat and 18 karat gold precious metals that were refined in the United States by another certified green manufacturer. There was a lot of chatter going on with fair mine, fair trade golds, metals. There wasn't really a definitive stance across a lot of different countries encompassing the people piece. Some people just had like one issue around mining. But just this year, we were finally able to partner with Fairmind Gold that does also encompass all the pieces that we believe in from a sustainable aspect, including the people piece and the environmental piece, which I think is fantastic. And that's a really big progression in the industry. From our stones, you know, as a young designer, I just made everything I loved, but the more I learned about them, the more I became pained by what I was making. So unfortunately, there's still a lot of things I love and would love to touch and make jewelry out of, but I just can't because it doesn't fit in with our ethos. I buy my diamonds from one person, third, fourth generation diamond dealer who can certify their provenance, but also not only where they came out of the ground, but who cuts them, how many children that cutter has, what goes back to the community when we support that diamond or that piece. And a lot of our other precious stones, precious gems are also come from responsible sources. We ask a lot of questions. We ask for certifications. And luckily there's more options than there used to be. I've always said to people, if you want a perfectly responsible piece, that you can buy an all gold piece or a fine jewelry piece, but also to Fairlith's point, what do we actually need, right? And I think that's a pretty big discussion as a designer and as a company is what are we putting out? So for me also, I went from an apex of having more than 250 accounts worldwide to now having less than 50. I make a lot less things, but a lot better things that have clean sources that I can feel really confident about what I'm putting out in the world.
Thank you, Melissa. Could you also tell us a little bit about how you've noticed buying habits evolved over the last few decades and if customers are starting to ask more questions and favor ethical collections and designers?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's actually been super exciting to see. I used to scare people away at trunk shows. People would come in and meet me and I talk about like how everything we made, how it was made, what was in it. And people were just like shell shocked and would like walk away because the discussion was so new. And I think people also had this guilt, right? If they were going to get in their car and drive away. And as a society, I think we tend to denigrate people for what they don't do rather than applaud for what we do. And it is in cumulative action where we can create change. It's not as individuals. So I think for bringing that dialogue and being able to embrace consumers and not shame them, but bring them into the conversation has empowered them to feel better about the choices they make. Now I have people come to me with crazy questions that sometimes I'll have to go research. People come into my store with their own stories. They have done a lot of research. They know exactly what they want. They're able to kind of weed through a lot of the greenwashing that exists in the industry now. And I think it's remarkable and super exciting to see that progression from a consumer standpoint, because like I said earlier, I think that's the only way we're going to be able to make change is to get the consumers on board and get them involved in asking really great questions that we can solve, because great design solves problems.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Grace, could you share with us a bit about your environmental goals and in what ways are you reducing Murowa's carbon footprint and helping to regenerate the planet? It would be interesting to also hear about land regeneration and environmental monitoring in particular, if you could share a bit about that.
Sure. Thank you, Maya. During my environmental studies, I was largely inspired by a report that was done by Brundtland, commonly known as our Common Future or the Brundtland Report. This called for a strategy to unite development and the environment, and which we now refer to as sustainable development. And this eventually led to the UN conference on environment and development. So in view of this, my passion has spread to environmental awareness to ensure everyone has a high respect for the environment and that serious considerations are made for the environment in any proposed project. So my passion really has been on creating awareness, whether it's within the workforce, influencing leadership, as well as the public at large. So in terms of initiatives to reduce the mine's carbon footprint, over the years, I've noted that creating awareness is really key for any environmental project to be successful. So the initiatives are mainly centered on training and awareness on greenhouse gas emissions and their impacts to the environment. I'm also responsible for ensuring that each department or process has set objectives and targets on electricity, fuel, and explosives usage. And I've set up a system for tracking resource usage. And from the results or from the monitoring, I then advise leadership on any deviation so that they address the root causes. I was also involved in developing a refrigerants replacement policy so that we phase out the ozone depleting gases to replace with environmentally friendly refrigerants for the refrigeration equipment, air conditioners in offices, and mobile equipment. And I'm also heavily involved in accurate and comprehensive sustainability reporting, which includes accounting for all the emissions as well as monitoring fuel and energy consumption efficiencies. So I'm also an environmental auditor. So I schedule and conduct audits to check conformance to equipment maintenance schedules. And being a mine, we also, as part of the land use, we clear land from time to time. And I've devised a system for issuing out land clearance permits so that we prohibit unauthorized and rampant land clearance. And in terms of vehicles, we've got a lot of heavy mobile equipment and small vehicles to support the day-to-day activities. So I devised a system for fuel saving, and it tracks movement of each and every vehicle. And in terms of light vehicles, we ensure that the trips are pulled so that we do not have to send a lot of vehicles in one direction. And also enforce measures such as switching off of engines when the vehicle is not in use, and timely servicing to minimize greenhouse gas emissions and maximize on fuel efficiency. In terms of waste management, we generate a lot of biodegradable waste from our mine canteen, and I've implemented biodegradable waste prevention and reduction strategies at the canteen so that we minimize the biodegradable waste that we send to the landfill. Then I also champion tree planting activities around the mine site and in the community to increase the carbon sink. And I've also managed to influence the procurement team to implement what we call green procurement, to ensure that when they buy equipment, ensure that it is energy efficient. We've also managed to replace the incandescent lights with the LED lights. And for remote sites, we've managed to install solar lights and solar geysers for warming our water at the village camp. And recently, RZM Murowa participated through the Business Council for Sustainable Development in the case studies that were conducted by the Climate Technology Center and Network, in short CTCN, which is an arm of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And some of the recommendations that came out from that case study or audits included the biogas digestion plant, which I'm currently championing, and it's almost complete. So this plant will have a capacity of about 83 cubic meters and is expected to power the mine kitchen and thereby eliminating the need for landfilling of biodegradable waste. So we'll manage all the methane gas that will emanate from the biodegradable waste. In terms of land regeneration, I've managed to create a culture of good environmental stewardship in employees through training and participation. And we conduct our annual tree planting activities during the month of from December to April. That's our rain season this side. And we also conduct monthly cleanup campaigns within the mine site, as well as outside in the local community. So whenever there's land clearance, I also ensure that if the land clearance permit is issued, we also remove the 15 centimeter layer of the topsoil and stockpile it on our stockpile bank so that we can use it for future revegetation or any rehabilitation works where we need topsoil. Then if there are any protected species that may be in the area that we want to clear, we ensure that they are rescued or relocated to a place where they will not be redisturbed again within the mine. So we've got protected species here like the aloe tauri and aloe critopoda. So recently we relocated about 300 of those at our site where we are currently constructing a 500 ton per hour plant. So these were successfully relocated to our decommissioned tailings dam. Then in terms of land rehabilitation.
Grace, I think that we might have to interrupt here just for the sake of time. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. It's absolutely amazing how you're covering so much ground with the work that you're doing. And I also really appreciate you bringing into the dialogue as well about the UN framework and how that's being implemented. So thank you so much for covering that. I want to ask you, Kirsten, if you could tell us really quickly, just because of the sake of time, about the carbon fault project that you're using that's this full diamond sourcing to lock away carbon. And then after that question, we'll move on to audience.
Sure. It's really it's an R&D, so it's a research project. But what we're looking kimberlite, so the rocks where diamonds come from, has the natural capacity to absorb carbon from the atmosphere. It does that no matter what. And what we are doing is a research project with a group of different universities looking at how we can enhance that capacity through, for example, adding certain bacteria and algae, or by different stacking methods or blowing air through. It's like, what can we do to enhance that capacity that exists? Which, I mean, if we can make it work at scale, is obviously really nice, that the rocks where diamonds come from and the waste that has been created can now be used to then again absorb carbon from the atmosphere. So that is the work. It's still very much in research and pilot phase. So we are looking at, okay, how can we bring that actually up to scale at and around our mine sites? So that's the very quick answer to that question. There's a lot of science behind it.
That's amazing. Thank you. And we have a really great audience question for Melissa. As someone who has been engaged in environmental issues in the long term, how can consumers tell which messages are greenwashing and which are genuine? And I think this is just such a wonderful question and so pertinent to the times right now.
Yeah, it's a really huge question. I think first though, you have to just define, as a consumer, define what sustainability means to you. It's a huge term, right? And it encompasses so many different things, which it's kind of been part and parcel to our conversation today. When we started the CFDA Sustainability Committee, Vanessa Friedman, the editor at the Times, called us out for how could you have this committee if we don't know what that word means across all the different modalities that encompass fashion. So I think there are some companies that do things really well, that specialize in one area. It might be a philanthropic angle, it might be a metal use, it might be a stone use, fabric use. So I think it's really, as a consumer, about educating yourself and figuring out what matters to you and then what matters to scale, I think, as what you're contributing to as a consumer. And then the advocacy that you have as a consumer, what your dollar actually means, right? When you buy something, you're supporting something. So you can choose to buy things that resonate with you and sync with your values, and then that can help make more change. And so it's really about just asking questions and doing research. I think with the advent of increased transparency in our times, we can't just blindly consume anymore. I think consumers, if they're truly care about greenwashing, it's really about doing the work and coming in the door when you're ready to buy, knowing what to ask, and then converting your consumer power to create change.
I love that way of framing it, by asking yourself first what it means to you for sustainability. Thank you for that, Melissa.
Yeah.
Fairleith, I would love to hear any thoughts from you about this question as well, because I know that your work and experience really parallels those values too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Melissa, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head when you said, what does it mean to you? Because it is such a massive topic. If you can buy something that's doing good, that's doing better, that's having more of a positive impact, I think that's always a really great benefit as well. I know that we're a bit short on time, so I'm not going to go on for too much longer, but yeah, I think it's what does it do for you, and do you really need it, at the end of the day.
Thank you. I know that we are just running out of time here, and there was another wonderful question that was put into the Q&A. And so we are going to answer all of the audience questions over email, and they will be followed up after the panel. We unfortunately do need to wrap just for the sake of time. So there was a wonderful question from Hunter, and that certainly will be answered. And if anyone from the audience has additional follow-up questions, please feel free to send them over email, and we will definitely get to all of them. And thank you all so much for sharing. It's incredible, the diversity of experience and backgrounds, and also innovative solutions that we have heard during this conversation. And clearly there's so much more to say and so much more to do, and that is incredibly exciting and encouraging. And I'm so honored to just be learning and in conversation with such powerful visionary women in this field. And thank you all for your time. And please, again, for the audience, don't hesitate to reach out with follow-up questions.
Thanks, Maya, for the great questions. Thank you, panelists. It was wonderful to hear your stories and be included today.
Thanks so much. Very pleased to be here. Thanks for a good discussion. Too bad we can't go out for a glass of wine together now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.